Doctor, how many times have I told you you can't read the Veritas? Because once you read it, you die from it. And even so, Doctor, you're still blind. And you haven't even told Bill yet. Gosh, Doctor, you never learn, do you? Here's my preview of Extremis. Enjoy.
Hey guys, what's up? I'm back with another video, and in today's video we're going to be doing the preview for Doctor Who's next episode, Extremis. Now, just before we start this preview, I just wanted to say, what the hell do I have behind me? Well, as you can clearly tell, I'm recording this in the morning, whereas usually I record all of my previews and reviews in the night time. But today, since I'm quite busy for today and also for the rest of the week, I'm quite busy, and so I won't have the time to record my preview for Extremis. So the only time that I will record this preview is in the morning. And so you're probably thinking that there was a bit of brightness there coming out. Yeah, so I have all of my jumpers covering up the brightness from the blinds, as my blinds are really inefficient of keeping the brightness out. They kind of keep all of the brightness, you know, out of the, the background. As you can clearly tell, it's not really bright now, but it was a few moments ago. But when the sun passes through the blinds, the brightness shows all throughout the room, and it does affect the camera very, very much. And so my camera is very, very sensitive with brightness, and whenever some brightness comes through the windows or throughout the window, it kind of affects the camera a bit, and it sort of affects my entire video. If I didn't have all of these jumpers blocking out all of the light, then I would potentially be, so disrupted by the brightness for this video. So this is what I'm doing for most of my reviews and previews if this situation ever happens again. So this will probably be most of the format for all of the other previews and reviews if I do them in the morning, but this will only happen very occasionally if I only get to do my previews in the afternoon, which is better for me. But however, I'm doing this in the morning, which therefore loads of brightness is coming in. As it's the morning, loads of brightness comes through the windows, and I do get affected so badly by the brightness, and it does affect the camera so much. So I apologise if there's any brightness coming through right now, or I hope there's not. And so I'm not going to let this brightness affect the video, because I really need to get this done so we can basically get it sorted and done and dusted for the next couple of days or so. So without further ado, let's begin the actual preview instead of me talking about me unfortunately having like some jumpers up there. You may have thought that these jumpers would just be here just for drying. No, these jumpers are not for drying. They're actually there for a purpose. They're not just there just because they are, because they're not like Nardo. They won't be in every single episode where Nardo doesn't have anything to do. But anyway, let's move on to the actual preview. Let's move on. Anyway, I think this episode, just before as I read the synopsis and everything about it, I was very much interested with this episode because it's very much of a religious episode, which in my opinion is such a different concept that Doctor Who has rarely done. I'm a Christian myself, or should I say Catholic, and I'm very much interested with this episode as the Veritas is also a real thing. And it does mention about how the Veritas and the Vaticans, which I'll get more into about that with as I read the synopsis. But I have to say that from my point of view, and with other Christians maybe watching Doctor Who, I'm not really too sure will they be offended by this episode, protesting religion in this episode. Because whenever religion is introduced into a TV show or film, you have to ask specifically, nicely or quite, if you can use religion in your episode or any sort of film. You must ask some people if you can use religion, or you can use the Pope or references in your episode or something like that. Because otherwise, if you don't ask for permission, then it's going to be seen as a quite offensive thing, or an offensive episode towards Christians and to other Catholics who have represented the Pope or respect the Pope in some way. And so this episode could come across as a very disrespectful episode towards Christians and Catholics, or anybody who might be religious. So I'm quite interested to see how far they will go with the expectations with religion in this episode. But I'm overall quite excited to see how they incorporate religion in Doctor Who, because religion is something that the Doctor doesn't really come across. Actually, the Doctor really comes at religion quite skeptical, because he thinks that he has his own religion of his own. He has the Time Lords, or should I say Rassilon should be more like his god or something like that. But the Doctor has become more over religion, and he very much skips it. He becomes quite skeptical about it. Like, he's way beyond religion, and so he doesn't really need to cover all that. But I think it comes to a time where he's actually relying on some religional purposes that could actually help him with his blindness. And as in the last episode, he was still blind in the cliffhanger at the end of Oxygen. So the Doctor's still blind, and I'm quite interested to see how is he going to cope in this episode, because although he's blind and Nardo knows it, but Bill and also his other enemies don't know it at all. So I'm really much looking forward to see how the Doctor's gonna cope with this amount of pressure that he's under. He's trying to read a certain book while he's blind, which is going to be quite difficult for him. But also it's going to be quite interesting to see why is he going to keep the secret from Bill. Bill is, you know, quite interested with the Doctor and is quite friendly with the Doctor. Also, I'm not really too sure if the Doctor's actually going to tell Bill that he is still blind. I think he's just going to say, oh, I'm trying for a new look. And so maybe he's going to modernize. He's going to keep a quite low secret for Bill. So for Bill to not really identify that the Doctor is still blind. Or will Nardo tell Bill in the end? I'm not really too sure. So we'll probably find out more about the blindness within this episode. I did mention that there were going to be a 3-episode story within Series 10. I think this is going to be the first of that 3-episode story. So since Extremis is going to be the first out of the 3 episodes of this story of the 3 episodes. Now, usually in Doctor Who they would have 2-parters, but in this time they're having a 3-parter episode, which is really interesting to see how far would this plot go with the blindness of the Doctors, and how would the Doctor cope in this episode. I'm really looking forward to it. And also Missy will also be returning in this episode, which I'm really intrigued by. Because I've seen in a few promo pics that Missy looks really devilish in my opinion. She looks absolutely fantastic in a few of the promo pics. And it's a new side to Missy that I really want to know her character in this episode and her role in this. And does Missy actually know that the Doctor's blind? I don't even know that she probably knew if the Doctor was blind, but how will Missy react to the Doctor's blindness? And will she ever take something away? I mean, there was a scene where Missy maybe is in the TARDIS, and will this actually put an idea in our mind that maybe Missy could steal the TARDIS while the Doctor is still blind? And will Missy do this in her advantage, really? I'm not really too sure if she wants possession of the Doctor's TARDIS like Anthony Anley's master in the 1980s wanted possession of the Doctor's TARDIS in the 1980s with Peter Davison. I'm not really too sure, but I think we'll probably see an overall explanation to this episode. But anyway, let's move on to the actual synopsis of the episode, which I have right here. I actually have quite a lot of information I have to talk about today. Sorry about this, guys. I'm coming down with something today as I'm doing this preview with a sore throat, so I apologise if I'm talking a bit weak in my opinion. Sorry about that, guys. Okay then, so since this episode Extremis is written by Steven Moffat, which we'll get on to him a bit later on, in the Vaticans, I'm not really too sure I'm pronouncing that right, in the Vaticans, yes, the Vatican's secret library of blasphemy, there is an ancient book known only as the Veritas. Throughout history, anyone who has ever read it has immediately taken their own life. Now a new translation is online and the danger is spreading. the Vatican appeals to the Doctor, will he read the Veritas? But can even the Doctor survive the ultimate truth? Now that seems really interesting in my opinion. Can the Doctor even survive the ultimate truth? I'm probably wondering, what is the ultimate truth? And the Veritas, many people don't really know if that's actually real or if it actually exists. Well, to be honest with you, it actually does exist. It doesn't really exist as an actual book, but over here on my phone, it does actually say that there is a statue of Veritas outside in the courts of Canada and something like that. Basically, I'm just going to show you a little photo of what Veritas might look like. But there's actually a deeper meaning of the word Veritas. And Veritas actually is also the given name of a Roman virtue of truthfulness. So this actually means that the Veritas is known as the ultimate truth or means truth. So that means that the Veritas is something that the Doctor will want to translate. But once you read it, you honestly die in that some way, which is so creepy. But how will the Doctor even read it? Because obviously he's blind. But maybe will he use his son's screwdriver to probably scan it? And maybe identify what's, the translation points to the Veritas. But once you translate it, you obviously die from it. So I actually feel that's actually really, really creepy. And although humanity has a desperation for knowing so much knowledge in the universe or in the world, they want to get so much knowledge from everything that they can get their hands on. And so it's going to be quite interesting to see how we can translate it. But once we translate it, we don't know the secret that we will actually die from it and we will take our own life for translating it. So that's actually really, really of a deeper meaning. So I'm actually really looking forward to see what this actual plot is of the episode. We're mentioning the plot. In Series 10, we've had some brilliant plots, and I think Oxygen's plot has been by far the strongest in my opinion. However, I think with this episode, since this episode is written by Steven Moffat, I have a very, very bad feeling that Steven Moffat is not really going to give us a good explanation of this episode. I think the plot has to be really, really well executed, but it must not be too complex or too complicated that we won't understand any of it at all. That's the one thing I'm really concerned about with Steven Moffat writing this episode. Although he can be great at times, he can be really fantastic like he did with Heaven Sent in the Series 9 finale, and then he could do an absolutely diabolical story like he did with Hell Bent, you know what I mean. But this episode could be quite controversial and it could go either way, to be honest. But can Steven Moffat produce an episode where the plot is not really that too complex or too complicated to understand? Because whenever I watch most of Steven Moffat's episodes, sometimes the plot is always in a good explanation, but when like in Hell Bent or The Husbands of River Song or like the Wedding of River Song, for example, that was really too complex and too complicated to understand. And mentioning about River Song, we do see a little bit of a scene in the next time trailer that River Song's diary has been seen in that trailer. So I'm not really too sure if River Song is going to return, but I think that book might bring up a reference to River Song in this episode. But I just really hope that River Song does not come back in this episode. I don't want her to come back in the vault, because if River Song is behind the vault, then I'll be so disappointed, because I think we've cleared up River Song enough in Doctor Who so far. So I think let's just leave River Song for the moment, because I don't think there's no point to go through her diary and to go through her timeline as more in depth and detail as possible. We've already experienced The Husbands of River Song and also The Wedding of River Song, which was clearly more enough to find out more about River Song. I think that's much of enough to find out more about River Song's timeline. I think it's too complicated enough to figure out more about River Song's life. So I just hope that it's not River Song, but maybe the Doctor uses River Song's diary to probably help him out to read the Veritas, maybe. But I'm not really too sure, but it could go either way this episode. But also I do have some more information around about here. So let me just read this a little bit out. I think this is a little bit more in depth about the Veritas and how its history has had a much deeper meaning and how something's gone terribly wrong with when people have translated the Veritas. There is a text buried deep in the Vatican, a text older than the church itself. The language is lost, but thanks to the works of an early Christian sect, the title has survived, Veritas. All copies of the sect translations disappeared shortly after mass suicide, but then after a few months, the Veritas was translated again. What does it say? No one knows, because everyone who has worked on the translation is now dead. By their own hand, all bodies recovered except one. So what could actually be that one body? In my mind, it's saying that it could be Johnson's master. It's probably to the point where one body's, when the master died in the End of Time Part 2, I'm not sure if he actually died. Well, sure, possibly he actually just disappeared. Maybe can Johnson's master be recovered as the one body's all recovered except one? Maybe that could be Johnson's master, but in my mind, it's saying Missy or Johnson's master, Missy or Johnson's master. It could be either one of those. So I definitely think that in the vault, also we'll definitely find out more on who's behind the vault in this episode. We'll probably find out who's behind it. And I definitely think it's going to be either Johnson's master or Missy. It could be either one of those. It does seem quite likely that it could be both of them. But it could be one or the other, or it could be something completely different. We can maybe put so many assumptions that it could be Johnson's master, or it could be such of a random person that we probably may not even experience. It could be a new character that we may not even be introduced to Doctor Who yet. So maybe we'll just have to wait and see on Saturday, because anything could happen in this episode. But I do feel like that this episode, after now reading this synopsis, I am interested with the episode. Also, the monks, I'm really looking forward to see how their character and their role in this episode, and how they have like such a long last history with the Veritas. And the monks, they look really, really creepy. They look really deformed monks, and I love the look of them, and I really like to see what their purpose is in this episode. And that maybe they could be the owners of the Veritas. Maybe they know what the truth is behind the Veritas and how they could translate it, because they know so much about the Veritas and its history and about its religion. So maybe the Veritas or the monks are trying to prevent anybody from translating the Veritas. And we see the Doctor in a few of the promo pics that he's actually got some other stuff wired up to his head, and he has some sonic shades on and a sonic screwdriver. That if he's probably scanning this Veritas with the sonic screwdriver, maybe. I'm not really too sure, but I definitely think that the Doctor is trying to translate it in some way with the sonic screwdriver, not actually using his own eyes. Potentially he's still blind. And how's the Doctor still going to cope that it's going to be such a difficult challenge that he's not going to tell anybody about his blindness? But it's going to be such a difficult challenge that how he can save everybody, but he's lost in the dark. And that was just a little quote at the end of the Next Time trailer, and that was really, really gripping. And then at the end of the Next Time trailer, we saw a little split second of Missy appearing. So Missy's definitely going to be in this episode. And not only just a couple of days ago, we had news that Missy was going to leave Doctor Who this year, which I obviously suspected that was going to happen, because Chris Chibnall, the next showrunner of Doctor Who, is wanting to get rid of the Doctor and also the companion as well, and also everybody else as well. So I think Chris Chibnall wants to start off everything fresh, and I think with Peter Capaldi leaving in Series 10 with Michelle Gomez, I think that's a good way of, ending their legacy in Doctor Who. She's only appeared in only 4 episodes. She's only appeared in Dark Water and Death in Heaven, and also The Magician's Apprentice, and also The Witch's Familiar. So she's only appeared in those episodes, but I'm quite intrigued to see how she does so well in this episode, and see her role in this episode, and what she's actually doing there. And like, she has some other bodyguards of there, maybe she's on a prison planet somewhere, and the Doctor's going there to save her. And then I did read something about how the introduction, or the intro, is probably like a little scene where the Doctor and Missy have a flashback, and it's almost like a little adventure or a little flashback in their timeline where the Doctor and Missy meet up. And so that's actually going to be quite interesting to see the little flashback between the Doctor and Missy, and see how their relationship cope within themselves. So maybe there could be a little secret revealed in the beginning, but I'm not too sure. There's loads of things that could be in this episode. But one thing that I think that this episode is going to be too heavy on with, that Steven Moffat is going to make the whole plot really complicated and so complex. I don't really want that to happen, because when Moffat does so complex and complicated plot lines, they make me so confused, and I think everybody will probably be confused by what Moffat's probably putting in the episode. It could be an absolutely diabolical episode where I think all of the blame will probably be on Steven Moffat, or it could be much better than what we expected. For me, I would have very low expectations, to be honest, because I don't really want to say that I'm really looking forward to this episode and like I'm hooked to it. I have fairly low expectations because I do think that this episode is going to be really good. I think it's going to be interesting, really fascinating with the religion concept introduced, and also we have the monks as well and their purpose in this. And then we see that the Veritas has a long last history, but I'm not too sure what the ultimate truth is and how will the Doctor read the Veritas. It's something very deep in, the episode, where there's more of a deep explanation that we're hopefully going to get in this episode. If Steven Moffat does not give a good explanation in this episode, then I could probably say that this episode could be the weakest out of Series 10. The only reason why I'm going to say this is that I just think that if Steven Moffat doesn't do a good strong plotline, and I hope he doesn't make it too complex and too complicated for me to understand, because I love all the plot lines so far in this series. I think Oxygen has been the strongest so far, but something in my mind tells me that this plotline is probably going to be the weakest, because obviously it's going to be so complex and so complicated. I don't really want it to be all that complex. I want it to be complex, I want it to be original and unique, but I don't want it to be that complex that will probably be confused by the plotline. So I'm really very much in doubt that is Steven Moffat going to produce a great story. I'm just praying right now, God, please let Steven Moffat do a brilliant story. Don't muck it up, please. I just hope that Steven Moffat just doesn't wreck this brilliant opportunity, because I definitely think that Steven Moffat just needs to nail this episode. Although he's done the pilot, which fair enough was a good introduction to Bill, I just hope that Steven Moffat doesn't go too heavy on with references, and I hope it's not too Moffat-y that we'll probably get a very complicated plotline and everything surrounding the episode will have so many references, and it'll be so much of a fan service episode where we'll probably suspect loads of references in this episode. I just really hope it doesn't happen, to be honest. I just really hope that can this episode be so fantastic and really fascinating and interesting at the same time, while there's a complicated plotline going on in the background. I'm really much looking forward to this episode. I really am. I'm not lying, guys. This episode does really fascinate me in some way, that religion is something that Doctor Who's not really done before, and the Doctor's really skeptical about religion, and I'm really looking forward to see how they incorporate it in this episode. The Veritas does seem like a very interesting passage. It looks like almost like a parchment or scroll that you see in ancient Egypt, and it looks like there's some ancient writing, and it's always so difficult to translate it, and whenever you translate it, obviously the people in the translation department have died from translating the Veritas, trying to learn the ultimate truth. But can the Doctor do it by not reading it, but just by scanning it? And that's almost like a form of reading it without the Doctor being killed off in the episode. Because as the synopsis did say, if you read or translate the Veritas, you unfortunately take your life and you die. And that seems very creepy. But how will the Doctor read it, since he's potentially blind? And I'm not really too sure if the sonic screwdriver is there probably to scan or probably read the Veritas for the Doctor. I'm not really too sure, but it does seem as a very great episode, and I just hope that many Christians or Catholics, and especially me, I hope this episode doesn't come across as an offensive episode towards Christian and Christianity and the Pope introduced in this episode. It's quite a difficult concept to introduce, that you need permission in order to have religion and the Pope introduced in this episode. So it's very much of that Are they going to go full head on with religion itself? Or is it going to be much drawn back by adding some sci-fi elements into it? So everything can go either way in this episode. It really can go either way. But overall, I'm just really looking forward to this episode. Now, I did read something earlier today that this could be Nardo's best episode so far. And when I was, reading this, I was thinking, what? Is this actually true? Could this be Nardo's best episode yet? I will believe it when I absolutely see it. I will just believe it when I see it, guys. That's the truth I have to say. Because I can't really judge anything right now just by, words or anything by pictures and stuff like that. I'll believe it when I see it. Because I don't think many people are going to be too heavy on with Nardo. Because I think Nardo has definitely lightened up to me. He's really shown his actual purpose in Doctor Who. And I'm actually proud of him. Because me being proud of Nardo is an understatement. But Nardo has really impressed me. He's really shown me a much deeper meaning to his character. And I hope within this episode we can learn more about him. I just wonder how Bill's going to cope with realising that the Doctor's still blind, even not telling her. Will the Doctor go into like a traumatic experience where Bill actually goes against the Doctor for not telling Bill in the first place that the Doctor's blind? And I feel like that the Doctor can usually care about himself and he doesn't really need any help at all. But when it comes to Bill, I do feel that the Bill really needs to be informed by Nardo or specifically by the Doctor himself to tell Bill that the Doctor is still blind, because that will really help Bill to help the Doctor in some way. But as Nardo had told in the 5th episode of Oxygen, he doesn't really like help. And I can see that the Doctor really doesn't like help, but I hope in this episode, can he probably learn something that maybe you don't need to do everything by yourself. If you have some person with you, you can get through it. So I'm just hoping that maybe the Doctor doesn't go too heavy on, that he can do it all by himself and he can analyse the Veritas and read it for himself to learn the ultimate truth. And I'm really interested to see what is the ultimate truth, because the Veritas does say that it is a meaning of truthfulness, and I'm really looking forward to it, seeing what is the actual truth behind the Veritas and what it actually translates to. And can the Veritas do something special that can actually help the Doctor resolve his blindness? I'm not really too sure that's going to happen, because in the next episode, obviously we're moving way too moving on in series 10, but I think it's called The Pyramid at the End of the World. I think that episode will also be another continuation of this episode, and then it will move on into the next episode called The Lie of the Land, which I really like that title actually. I do like The Lie of the Land. Maybe it'd probably be something quite interesting or something like that. I don't know. I think I'm going so in depth with the next other episodes instead of this episode, to be honest. So I think we just merely concentrate on this episode for the time being, because I feel like if I oversee on what's looking on in the other episodes, I'm going to get a bit too ahead of myself. But I think for this episode, it's going to be quite an interesting episode on how religion's introduced. How will the Doctor cope with the blindness, but even so trying to read the Veritas? It's almost like a very big challenge for him. Like, Steven Moffat's not making everything easy for the Doctor. This is actually for the first time that the Doctor actually has a disability, and how this disability can overtake him in some way, that he's lost in the dark, but how can he save everybody else? And that something very big is coming, and he's very worried of what's coming, on in the future. But he's very much in desperation that he can do everything by himself, that he's blind. But he doesn't realise that Bill is there for him, and Bill really needs to understand that whenever there's a chance, Bill, you must take it. Because otherwise, if Bill doesn't take the opportunity to help out the Doctor, then there may not be any chance to save the Doctor from his blindness. So I'm really much looking forward to see Bill in this episode. Of course, obviously Nardo, I'm really much looking forward to see, is this episode going to be his best episode yet? Is he going to help the Doctor in some way? Is he going to care for the Doctor? Is he going to shout and be more authoritative to the Doctor, like last week's episode? I'm not really too sure. I'm really hoping that maybe this episode could be much better than what I expected from, because I do have some doubt that this episode could be too heavy on with a complex plotline, and it will be really confusing to understand. But I'm really much looking forward to the monks and the Veritas and all of this ancient writing and translations. and also with the history behind the Veritas and in the Vaticans, if I'm pronouncing that right. Everything just really intrigues me with religion, and it's something Doctor has not really done before. So it's a new concept, it's original, it's unique, and I'm really much looking forward to it, and especially Missy. And although she's leaving in Doctor Who this year, I'm hoping that maybe if this is only the one possible time that Missy is appearing in this series, then I just hope that she does an absolutely phenomenal performance, because I really want every single person to go out with a bang if it's their last series. So I just hope that Missy does really, really well in this episode. And maybe if she's in the next episode and in the next episode, I'm really looking forward to more and more seeing of her, because this will really build up more of Missy's absolute brilliant character as a female master, which is always something different and many people have really criticised over. But I think a different female master is something really original, it's unique, and I always will respect Steven Moffat for creating a female master. I'll always respect him, but I'll never really respect him for what he did in Hellbent. Although I liked it in some way, but I think for many fans, I think he really needs to redeem himself for what he's done there. For more of the episodes that he's done, I think this episode really needs to be one that he can hit the nail on. I have very low expectations that this episode's going to be very, very interesting, very fascinating, I hope fantastic, but not too complex. That's what I'm hoping for in this episode. But anyway, I think we'll probably figure out everything on what's going to happen in this episode when it comes to Saturday's episode. But the Veritas and the monks do sound really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to see the characters in this. I think they're more religious characters. I think there's the Pope involved, and I think there's somebody else there that looks quite familiar in my opinion. But I think I've seen him before, but I can't remember his actor's name or the name of him. But I'm going to have to find out when it comes to the episode. But he does remind me of somebody else that I've seen before. And I'll probably get to him, I'll probably name his name when it comes to the review. But I think that's all we have time for today, guys. Anyway, thank you guys for watching for this preview on Extremis. I hope you have enjoyed it. Make sure you leave a like on this video, but also comment down below and also what you think of Extremis, or what could happen in Extremis. Do you think that the Doctor can resolve his blindness in this episode, or will it go much further on within the remaining episodes of this series? Will it become an actual series plot of the entire series? I'm not really too sure, and I'm hoping that maybe can Steven Moffat keep all of his hints to himself. I'm not sure if he's going to give away any secrets or any hints on what could be lurking in the finale. I really hope he doesn't, because I really like things to be given in a secret way. He's very interesting, and also he's very smart as well on how to pinpoint and drop down hints in every single episode that can probably lead to the finale. So I'm probably seeing something brilliant from Steven Moffat in this episode, or probably something diabolical. We never know. It could go either way. This episode could be the most controversial episode that we could ever have, although Knock Knock was a really controversial episode as well, so we're not really too sure. But anyway guys, thank you for watching for this preview, and I'll see you guys next time for my review on Extremis, and I will see you guys for that then soon.